My name is Charlotte Bennett, and the day my father introduced me as the help at his wedding was the same day I decided to destroy everything he'd built. But here's the twist he never saw coming: I already owned 40% of his precious company. And by the time I was done, he'd be begging me for mercy. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was March 15, 2019, a crisp Saturday afternoon in Napa Valley, California. The sun was setting over the rolling vineyards, casting everything in that perfect golden light that makes you believe in fairy tales. Except my story? It was about to become a horror show. I was 28 years old, standing in a corner of the Meadowood estate, wearing a simple black dress that my stepmother-to-be, Vivian Ashford, had specifically chosen for me. Something understated, she'd said with that razor-sharp smile of hers. We wouldn't want you drawing attention away from the bride. My father, Richard Bennett, was marrying a woman only 6 years older than me. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was watching him transform from the man who'd raised me into someone I barely recognized. Backstory: 1:30 to 4 o'clock, my mother, Eleanor, passed away when I was 15. Breast cancer. It was sudden, brutal, and it shattered our family into pieces. For years, it was just Dad and me against the world. He taught me everything about running Bennett Technologies, the software company he'd built from nothing in our garage. I remember being 17, sitting in board meetings during summer break, taking notes while Dad negotiated deals worth millions. One day, Charlotte, he'd tell me, this will all be yours. You've got the mind for this business. You're my legacy. I believed him. God, I was so naive. I went to Stanford, majored in business administration and computer science, graduated summa cum laude in 2013. While my classmates were backpacking through Europe, I was working 60-hour weeks at Bennett Technologies, learning every department from the ground up. Then Vivian happened. She waltzed into our lives in January 2018. Introduced as a business consultant Dad had hired to help expand into the Asian market. Vivian was stunning, I'll give her that. Tall, elegant, with jet black hair and the kind of sophistication that came from old money and European finishing schools. Within 3 months, she'd moved from consultant to Dad's girlfriend. Within 6 months, she was living in our family home, the house where Mom had planted roses in the garden, where I'd taken my prom photos on the staircase. Charlotte, darling, Vivian would coo, her French accent dripping like honey laced with arsenic. Your father tells me you're quite involved in the company. How quaint. She began making changes. Subtle at first, suggesting Dad hire more experienced executives, recommending he restructure the company, hosting dinner parties where I was conveniently forgotten on the guest list. The worst part? Dad ate it up. He was completely under her spell. But here's what neither of them knew. Back in 2015, when I turned 24, my grandmother, Mom's mother, Dorothy Pierce, passed away and left me her entire estate. $7 million. Grandma Dorothy had always been sharp as a tack. Charlotte, she told me months before she died, men can be fools, especially when a beautiful woman bats her eyelashes. Your mother would want you protected. Promise me you'll invest this wisely. I promised. In August 2016, Dad needed capital for a major expansion. The company was doing well, but he wanted to acquire a smaller competitor, and the banks were being difficult about loans. I approached him with a proposal. I'd invest $3 million in exchange for equity. Are you sure, honey? Dad had asked, actually concerned. This is your inheritance from Grandma Dorothy. I believe in Bennett Technologies, I told him honestly. And I believe in you. We signed the papers. I became the owner of 15% of the company. Then, in early 2018, before Vivian's claws were fully embedded, Dad needed another cash injection for a lucrative government contract. I provided $2 million more. By March 2018, I owned 40% of Bennett Technologies. My father owned 51%. The remaining 9% was split among early investors and key employees. Now, back to that wedding day. The guest list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley elite. CEOs, venture capitalists, tech moguls, everyone who was anyone in the industry. Over 200 guests, champagne flowing like water, and a string quartet playing classical music as the sun set. I was helping coordinate with the catering staff, not because I had to, but because I actually liked being useful. That's when I overheard Vivian talking to a group of her wealthy friends. Oh, Richard is just too generous, she was saying, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. He even employed his daughter for the event. Though between you and me, I'm not sure what she actually does at the company. Richard says she's, how did he put it? Enthusiastic but inexperienced. My blood ran cold, but the real gut punch came during the reception. Dad stood up to give a speech, Vivian clinging to his arm like a beautiful parasite. I want to thank everyone who helped make this day special, he began, his voice carrying across the garden. The amazing staff at Meadowood, our incredible wedding planner, Monica, and of course, my daughter Charlotte, who's been running around making sure everything's perfect. Give her a round of applause, folks, she's been better than any professional housekeeper we could have hired. The crowd laughed. Actually laughed. Like it was a charming joke instead of a degrading slap in the face. Vivian's smile was triumphant. I stood there, champagne glass in hand, feeling every eye in the garden on me. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others were still chuckling. And my father? He didn't even notice my expression because he was too busy gazing adoringly at his new wife. That's when something inside me broke. And something else, something colder and sharper, took its place. I didn't make a scene. That's not my style. Instead, I smiled, raised my glass in a mock toast, and started planning. The Monday after the wedding, I called my attorney, Marcus Chen. Marcus had been Grandma Dorothy's lawyer and had helped structure my investment in Bennett Technologies. More importantly, he was ruthlessly competent and loyal. Marcus, I said, sitting in his downtown San Francisco office, I need you to explain my exact rights as a 40% shareholder. His eyebrows rose. Charlotte, what's going on? I told him everything. The humiliation. Vivian's manipulation. Dad's transformation. When I finished, Marcus leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. Legally, you have significant power, he said carefully. With 40%, you can't override your father's decisions since he has controlling interest, but you can make things very difficult. You can call for special board meetings. You can demand financial audits. You can block certain major decisions that require more than a simple majority. What about voting him out? I asked. Marcus's expression turned serious. That would require 51%. You'd need to convince some of the minority shareholders to side with you. It's possible, but it would be nuclear. Are you sure you want to go down this path? I thought about Mom. About every late night I'd spent at the office. About Dad calling me a housekeeper in front of the entire industry. I'm sure. Over the next 3 months, I did something I'd never done before. I started investigating my own father's company. Not because I wanted to find dirt, but because I needed to understand exactly what Vivian was doing. What I discovered made my blood boil. I started with the financials. As a major shareholder, I had access to the company's books, but Dad had always handled the high-level strategy. I'd been content to manage my division, software development, and trust him with the rest. That trust had been a mistake. I discovered that since Vivian entered the picture, Dad had made several questionable decisions. He'd created a new, consulting position for Vivian at $350,000 a year. He'd hired 3 of her friends for executive roles, each making 6 figures, despite them having minimal tech industry experience. But the real bombshell came in June 2019 when I stumbled across a memo about a proposed merger. Bennett Technologies was in talks to merge with Ashford International, Vivian's family company. According to the proposal, the new entity would be called Ashford Bennett Technologies, with my father as CEO and Vivian as president. The structure would dilute all existing shareholders' percentages. My 40% would become 22%. Dad's 51% would become 35%. The Ashford family would own 40%. In other words, Vivian was maneuvering to take control of the company my father had built, that my mother had supported through the lean years, that I had invested millions in, and Dad was going along with it, completely blind to her manipulation. I needed allies. Fast. First, I reached out to Gerald Thompson, who owned 4% of the company. Gerald had been with Bennett Technologies since the beginning. He'd been Dad's college roommate and first employee. He was 62 now, thinking about retirement. But he was also old-school loyal. We met at a coffee shop in Palo Alto on a foggy morning in July. Gerald, I said, sliding the merger documents across the table, have you seen these? His face went pale as he read. Jesus, Charlotte. Richard showed me some preliminary numbers, but not this. She's taking over, I said flatly. My father's too blinded by love or lust or whatever this is to see it. But that's
my mother's legacy she's stealing. That's your 20 years of hard work she's about to claim. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked up at me, and I saw something I recognized in his eyes. Betrayal. What do you need from me? Next was Patricia Rodriguez, our CFO, who owned 2%. Patricia was brilliant, no nonsense, and had always treated me as a colleague rather than the boss's daughter. When I showed her the financial irregularities and the proposed merger terms, she didn't hesitate. I'm in, she said. I've been watching this train wreck in slow motion. Vivian's been pressuring Richard to replace me with someone from Ashford International, an accountant who can better understand the new corporate structure. I'm 46 years old. Charlotte, I'm not letting some gold digger push me out of the company I helped build. One by one, I brought the minority shareholders into my confidence. By August 2019, I had commitments representing 48% of the company. My 40% plus 8% from Gerald, Patricia, and two other early investors. We were 3% short of the 51% needed to override Dad's voting power. But I had one more card to play. On August 23, 2019, I called for an emergency board meeting. It was my right as a major shareholder, and legally, Dad couldn't refuse. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at our company headquarters in San Jose. The conference room on the 20th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was the same room where Dad had announced his first major contract, where he told the team about Mom's diagnosis, where he'd promised me, years ago, that I was his legacy. I arrived early, my heart pounding, but my expression calm. Patricia and Gerald were already there, looking nervous but determined. The other board members filed in, confused about the sudden meeting. Dad arrived last, Vivian on his arm. She wasn't a board member, but apparently, she'd decided to attend anyway. Charlotte, Dad said, his tone already irritated. What's this about? We have a major client presentation tomorrow. This better be important. I stood up, Marcus at my side, and placed a thick folder in front of each board member. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Richard Bennett's leadership. I announced, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. And I'm proposing that the merger with Ashford International be permanently rejected. The room exploded. What the hell? Dad's face went red. Charlotte, have you lost your mind? Vivian's mask finally slipped, her beautiful features twisting with anger. This is absurd. Richard, you need to shut this down now. I can't, I said calmly, looking directly at my father. I own 40% of this company. Dad, the same company you called me a housekeeper at your wedding. The same company Mom helped you build. The same company I've poured my inheritance and my life into. Now, wait just a minute. Dad started, but I cut him off. No, you wait. For the past year and a half, you've let Vivian systematically take over everything Mom and you built together. You've hired her friends, paid her an exorbitant consulting fee for work she's never actually done. And now you're about to hand over control of Bennett Technologies to the Ashford family. I turn to the rest of the board. Page 12 of your packets. That's the proposed merger agreement. Look at the equity split. Look at the new management structure. Every single one of us loses under this deal, except the Ashfords. Patricia spoke up, her voice sharp and professional. I've reviewed the financials extensively since January 2018. When Vivian Ashford entered the picture as a consultant, company expenditures have increased by 34%, while revenue growth has remained flat. We're being bled dry to support positions and salaries that provide no value. Gerald cleared his throat. Richard, you and I have been friends for 40 years. I've never questioned your leadership. But this, he gestured at the documents. This isn't you. Eleanor would be heartbroken. Dad's face cycled through emotions, anger, confusion, and then something that might have been shame. He looked at the merger documents, really looked at them, and I saw the moment reality started to crack through Vivian's carefully constructed illusion. The equity split, he said slowly. Vivian, you told me this was 50-50 between our families. It is, darling, Vivian said quickly, her accent thickening. 40% is close enough to 40% versus 51%, I interrupted. That's not close enough. That's control. You're taking control of my father's company. Our company, Vivian hissed, dropping all pretense of sweetness. Richard and I are married. What's his is mine. Actually, Marcus interjected smoothly. Bennett Technologies is Mr. Bennett's separate property, established before the marriage. California is a community property state, but assets owned prior to marriage remain separate unless explicitly commingled. You have no legal claim to his shares. Vivian's expression turned venomous. She turned to Dad, her voice taking on a pleading quality. Richard, you can't let them do this. We're partners. We're building an empire together. But Dad was staring at the financial reports, his hands shaking slightly. You told me Charlotte was undermining the company, he said quietly. You said she was inexperienced, that she was holding us back. You suggested I reduce her role, maybe buy out her shares at a fair price. My stomach dropped. You were going to force me out. Dad looked at me, and for the first time in 18 months, I saw my real father behind his eyes. Vivian said you'd be happier starting your own venture, that the conflict between you two was toxic for the company. I thought, God, Charlotte, I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing? My voice cracked despite my best efforts. The right thing was calling me a housekeeper at your wedding. The right thing was erasing Mom's memory and replacing her with a woman who's been manipulating you from day one. Silence fell over the conference room outside the windows. San Jose sprawled beneath us, indifferent to the family drama unfolding on the 20th floor. I'm calling for a vote, I said, standing up straighter. All those in favor of rejecting the Ashford International merger. Hands went up around the table. Gerald, Patricia, the other minority shareholders, even David Kim, who'd always been Dad's yes man, slowly raised his hand. That's 48%, I said. The motion needs 51% to pass. Dad, you own the deciding vote. Every eye in the room turned to Richard Bennett. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. The past 18 months had added years to his face. I realized he'd lost weight. There were lines round his eyes that hadn't been there before. When had that happened? When had my father become this stranger? Richard, Vivian said, her voice desperate now. You can't seriously be considering this. We're married. We're a team. We've been married for 5 months. Dad said slowly, still looking at the documents. But Charlotte's been with me for 28 years. She invested her inheritance in this company. She worked 60-hour weeks while her friends were traveling and partying. And I called her a housekeeper. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. Your mother would never forgive me. Then he raised his hand. I vote to reject the merger. Vivian stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. You ungrateful bastard. After everything I've done for you, everything I've given up, I couldn't help the laugh that escaped. You gave up nothing. You maneuvered your way into my father's life, into his bed, into his business. You were never interested in him. You wanted what he'd built, what my mother helped him build. Your mother was weak. Vivian spat, and the entire room seemed to freeze. A pathetic little housewife who couldn't even beat cancer. She would have held Richard back forever. I made him better. I made him powerful. Dad stood up slowly, his face ashen. Get out? What? Get out of this building. Get out of my company. Get out of my life. The next 6 months were brutal. Vivian didn't go quietly. She hired a top divorce attorney and filed for spousal support, claiming she'd sacrificed her career to support Dad's vision. She demanded half of everything, including half of his Bennett Technologies shares. But Marcus was better. He documented every financial manipulation, every fraudulent expense report, every fake consulting fee. He proved that Vivian had entered the marriage with the deliberate intention to defraud my father and steal his company. By February 2020, the divorce was finalized. Vivian walked away with nothing except her legal fees and a reputation in Silicon Valley that ensured she'd never work in tech again. But the damage to my relationship with Dad was done. We were civil, professional at board meetings. He apologized multiple times with tears in his eyes. But there was a distance between us now that hadn't existed before. Some trust, once broken, can't be fully repaired. Then came March 2020, and COVID-19 hit. The pandemic should have destroyed Bennett Technologies. We were positioned in all the wrong markets, with no remote work infrastructure and major contracts dependent on in-person services. But Dad and I, working together for the first time in years, pivoted the company in 90 days. We shifted to cloud-based solutions, developed remote collaboration software, and turned our biggest weakness into our greatest strength. By December 2020, Bennett Technologies had tripled in value. It was Christmas Eve, 2020, I was alone in my apartment in San Francisco, staring out at the empty streets. COVID had canceled all holiday gatherings.
I'd spent the day on video calls with friends, but the loneliness was crushing. My doorbell rang at 7 p.m. When I checked the camera, I saw Dad standing in the hallway, wearing a mask and holding a shopping bag. I opened the door, confused. Dad? What are you doing here? We're supposed to be sheltering in place. I got tested, he said quickly. I'm negative. And I couldn't. Charlotte, I couldn't spend another holiday without my daughter. I let him in. We sat 6 feet apart in my living room, masks on, and he pulled out a wrapped box from his shopping bag. Open it, he said quietly. Inside was a stock certificate, a physical one, old-fashioned and official. It represented 6% of Bennett Technologies, transferred from Richard Bennett to Charlotte Bennett. That gives you 46%, Dad said. Not quite equal to my 45%, but close enough. I want you to be my partner, Charlotte. Really my partner, not just a name. I want to rebuild what Vivian destroyed. What I destroyed. I looked at the certificate, tears blurring my vision. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Your mother trusted me with her legacy, and I almost threw it away for a beautiful face and empty promises. But you? You fought for this company. You saved it. You saved me, even after I humiliated you in front of everyone who matters. He pulled down his mask, and I saw how much he'd aged. I'm sorry, Charlotte. I'm so goddamn sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm asking for a chance to earn back your trust. I set down the stock certificate and moved closer, pulling down my own mask. I never stopped loving you, Dad. I was angry, hurt, betrayed, but I never stopped loving you. We hugged for the first time in 2 years. And I felt something that had been broken inside me start to heal. Epilogue, 40:00-43:00. It's November 2025 now, as I write this. Bennett Technologies just went public last month, and our IPO was one of the most successful of the year. The company is now worth $1.2 billion. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Dad's still CEO, but he's talking about retirement, about traveling to all the places Mom wanted to visit but never got to see. As for Vivian? I heard through industry gossip that she's in Paris, married to some French industrialist. I hope she's happy. I really do. Because despite everything, her betrayal gave me something unexpected. It gave me my father back. Patricia Rodriguez is now our CFO and owns 5% of the company. Gerald Thompson retired last year with enough money to buy that boat he always dreamed about. The other early investors who stood by me all became multimillionaires when we went public last week. Dad and I had dinner at Mom's favorite restaurant, a little Italian place in North Beach that makes homemade pasta. Over tiramisu, he looked at me and said, "Your mother would be so proud of you. Not because of the money or the success, but because you fought for what was right, even when it meant fighting me." She'd be proud of both of us, I said. We found our way back to each other. He raised his glass of wine. To Eleanor, the woman who made us both who we are. To Mom, I agreed, clinking my glass against his. And to second chances. The funny thing about revenge is that when you finally get it, it often looks nothing like you imagined. I thought revenge would be destroying my father, watching him lose everything he'd built. But real revenge? Real revenge was building something stronger together, proving that love and family can survive even the worst betrayals. Vivian tried to take everything from us. Instead, she gave us the wake-up call we needed. So if you're out there, Vivian, raising champagne glasses with your new husband in some Parisian penthouse, you should know this: you failed. You didn't destroy the Bennetts. You made us unbreakable, and that 40% you tried to steal? It's now worth about $400 million. Thank you for that. Really. Thank you for being exactly who you were. Because it forced me to become exactly who I needed to be. My name is Charlotte Bennett. I own 46% of a billion-dollar company, and I'm nobody's housekeeper.